Hello. I'm Dr. Michelle Wendeling with BeTheBestChiropractor.com, and Facebook has thrown a curveball at me because this is a new way to do video lives or Facebook Lives. So bear with me as I go through this fun little bit. I'm super honored that the WDC asked me to do a presentation on boundaries, because we've been talking about self-care this whole month, and Leah Meadows been doing a great job of kind of getting us involved and doing multiple, hey Christina, doing multiple days back to back of self-care and really structured self-care. And one of the things that's most important for me with self-care is setting boundaries. Because if I don't set boundaries, my self-care doesn't get done, right? And I don't know if anybody else has that issue or if it's just me, but it sure seems like that's a thing, and my patients struggle with that too. So today we are going to talk about the importance of setting boundaries, and then we're going to talk about ways that you can set boundaries, suggestions for you in your practice and setting those boundaries. And then I'm going to share with you a boundary setting ritual that I do pretty much every morning. And so it helps me to kind of set the tone for the day. So stay tuned for that towards the end of this video. And then if you have questions or need help with setting boundaries yourself, please reach out. As I said, I'm Dr. Michelle Wendling, and I own BeTheBestChiropractor.com, which is a coaching and mentoring platform designed to do custom coaching and mentoring for docs. And one of the things we talk about all the time is boundaries. Okay, so let's get started. So one of the cool things about boundaries are actually designed to protect you, those in the boundary, and others outside of the boundary. So if you think about the zoo, the boundaries are there not only to protect the humans from the animals, but also to protect the animals from the humans. So it's really important to have a solid boundary so that the inside and the outside are both protected. So one of the things I always think of is when you set a healthy boundary, it actually is more of service to others even than it is to yourself. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm being selfish, I'm not being good customer service, I'm not showing empathy. And I'm like, I think it's the opposite of that. I think if you set a solid boundary, people really love to know what to expect. It's really comforting for people to know what to expect. So, there's a reason that when you walk into a big department store, there's a clear boundary on the path, right? It's not just random stuff all over the place you have to walk around, right? It's a clear pathway. That's called boundaries. It's direction and boundaries. And that really sets you up for success when you hold those boundaries and then consistently do that as well. You're going to hear my cat meowing now and then, so say hi to her. Hi, Dolce. Okay, so one of the most important things with self-care is setting boundaries, and then making sure that those boundaries are serving you and that you're consistently holding those lines, holding those boundaries. I was talking to a couple patients about the fact that I was going to do this discussion, and one of them said, well, my dad has a saying, and that saying is, your yes has no value if you don't say no. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And he said, yeah. He said his dad taught him over and over again that the yes is no good. It has zero value if you're not also capable of saying no. So that being said, I think that kind of sets the biggest stage for us. So if you're always saying, yes, you can come in on my breaks, and yes, I can get a new patient in, yes, I'll stay late, yes, I'll work on Saturday, yes, you can take a day off, that really there's no time for you to take a day off, and you're always saying yes, the value of your yes gets less and less and less. That also means people will work less for your yes. Work less for your yes. That's a fun thing to say. And it also means that when you say yes, they just expected it. So it wasn't like, oh, I got a yes, that's so great, she's going to get me in. They won't have that, oh, she's going to get me in, that's awesome. Instead, they'll be like, well, yeah, she always does. She always gets me in. So when you're bending your boundaries and being flexible for a patient, which response would you rather have? If you have firm and good boundaries, you're going to get the, thank you so much, Dr. Michelle, for getting me in. Oh my gosh, that means so much to me. As opposed to the, yeah, you always give up your breaks, so meh, it's a thing. I'll just do it again next week. So again, the value of your yes goes up significantly when you have boundaries and you get to say no. Always apply your oxygen mask before others, right? You gotta love that right now in practice, right? With all the masks, getting on the airplane with a mask on. How do you apply your oxygen mask? Oh, that blows my mind. I don't even know. But always apply your oxygen mask first. Take care of yourself, set your boundaries to protect yourself first, and then you can be of service. And us, some of us are, it's the hard to do that. It is so difficult. And a lot of that is just because we want to be of service, we're empathetic, we want to be high customer service, and we have such a hard time saying no to others and applying our oxygen mask. And, you know, it's just the nature of the beast of being a chiropractor is we want to be of service to others. So apply that oxygen, set those boundaries. Okay, so now the question is, how do I set those boundaries? Because we know we need to. We see the importance of it. You know, survival of our practice depends on it. So how do we set the boundaries? Well, one of the ways you set boundaries is having effective office policies, right? And you have your patients typically sign these policies when they come in, right? You have them sign a no-show cancellation policy. You have them sign a agreement to pay policy. You know, sometimes you have them do something that encourages them to sign and say, yes, I'll be here at every appointment, some kind of commitments. So you have them sign all of those. But I go into a lot of practices that I'm helping, and most of them are not. And they're giving people 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times to break that boundary and still be okay. And mostly that comes out of fear, right? Because they're like, oh man, if I tell them they have to pay the no-show fee, gosh, maybe I should make it a really low no-show fee, like $10, because then they won't leave, but I'll still get money. There's still value there. Like, yeah, but that's a $10 value. You're a $65 visit or an $85 visit. That person should be paying your entire visit fee if they don't show up for that appointment. And yes, there's some cases and so on, but you should train your staff so that they're the ones making those calls instead of the doctor, because they're going to have less of the emotional response for that if you train them well. So set up those policies and stick by them. Empathy and high customer service is really important, but it's actually incredibly high customer service to have boundaries and stick with them, right? Because if you have Bob who constantly is late to his appointment, and so then you push back everybody else just a little bit, Bob's 10 minutes late, so you guys visit a little short, so then you're only 3 minutes, catch up a little, so then you're only 2 minutes late for Barbara, and then you're only 1 minute late for Bob. That doesn't serve any of those people. That cascade is not great for you. Plus the amount of stress that your body goes under when you're doing that, and we've all been there, I do it too, is pretty significant, right? So try to set that boundary. And if they're more, in our office, if you're more than 8 minutes late, you don't get seen, because I have a 15-minute visit and I can't effectively do a good head to toe, feet, ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, elbows adjustment, listen to the body, do a good assessment and a great adjustment, and effectively serve them in less than that much time. And that's just the way it works in our office. And so people know that. And when you set that policy, that's the goal is to provide them the best possible care. And so if you're bending your boundaries and you're flustered and you're running late, that's when you're going to make a mistake. And that's where you're going to do less effective care for them. That's when their money's not going to be worth as much to them, because they're not going to get as much value out of that visit. So those are boundaries really important to set that you can set in your office policies. Utilize your office staff, because I will tell you, they can be bulldogs and great gatekeepers if well trained. So I will tell my staff, because I know myself, I'm like, yes, I'll work through my lunch. Yes, I will give up a break. I'm that person. I've always been. And so I fight really hard to set that boundary. And then I empower my staff to say no for me, which helps a ton. And since then, now I can say no all the time. But it took me probably 3 or 4 years of my staff saying no for me, and then learning they didn't leave and they paid the no-show fee and they came on time, and holy crap, this works, right? So it took me like 3 years of seeing my staff set those boundaries and seeing the patients still be fine with that, actually appreciate those boundaries. And, you know, they'll walk right in and hand the credit card and go, I know I missed my last appointment, please charge me for that. And I'm just like, whoa. So if you set the boundaries, you'll be amazed at how much success you get. And use your staff to be that bulldog. Use your staff to not let you put a new patient over your lunch, right? That's just not a thing. Another place, just as a reminder, lunch is for lunch. Lunch isn't for catch up. Lunch is for lunch. So if you schedule a lunch, take lunch. Have I said that enough times? Because I'm talking to myself. If you do the lunch, okay, I'm doing the lunch. So you have to take your lunches and actually do lunches. Don't make that your admin time. Schedule a separate admin time and put those boundaries around that admin time solidly. Guard that admin time like Mama Bear, and have your staff empower them to tell you, you need to guard that admin time like Mama Bear, and just empower them and don't cut them short. So another great place to set boundaries is patient education, right? Have you ever had a patient trying to dictate your care for them? Nope, that's just me. Okay, just checking, right? So of course we all have that. We have the guy who's like, oh, are you sure you got the spot? And it's still kind of wonky right here. Or you cracked it on one side, can you crack it on the other? You ever had those questions? Or is that just me, right? You gotta love that. Well, that's where boundaries and patient education come really well in handy. So I'm often talking to my patients about the importance of the adjustment and how it works and all the things. And when someone says, would you mind just adjusting it on the other side too? My other doc used to do that, or I think it feels like it needs it, or whatever. Certainly go back in, high customer service, palpate around, and if you don't think it needs an adjustment, draw the boundary, because then the next time they come in, they're going to ask you to adjust their ankle 2 times. Then they're going to ask you to adjust their knee another time. And then you're going to be in there for like 45 minutes when it's supposed to be a 15-minute adjustment, because they're going to want another thing and another thing and another thing, right? So those are pieces that are really important. So set those boundaries and explain, you know what, there's really nothing else to adjust in here. There's definitely some muscle tissue that needs to relax, but that nerve flow is going great. Heal itself. It just might take some time. Set that boundary, put your foot down, and just say that's how it works. What we do on our second visit in the report of findings, and I would say it's just on the second visit, but honestly, setting boundaries is kind of an ongoing process, right? Just like patient education, it's an ongoing process. So when you're setting those boundaries, on that second visit, what we do is the report of findings, where we say, this is your job, and this is my job. So it's kind of like, this is my sandbox. I'm going to use my knowledge, my skills, my education, and I'm going to figure out what's going on. I'm going to do the treatment that's most appropriate for your body to get your muscles to balance, get your nerves to fire, all of the things. Your job is to show up for all your appointments, lower your stress levels, eat healthier, right? So they have their job and you have your job. And they need to agree to that. So they actually sign that paper. If you'd like to see a copy of that paper, send me a PM or something, and I can get you a copy of what that looks like. But it sets you up for success, and it sets them up for success, because then they aren't the ones who are like, well, you got to fix me, doc. It's like, well, that's not my job. Remember my job? My job is to push things in the right direction and use my skills and knowledge to get your body to head that direction. Your job is all of this. Like, you're in contact with you way more than I am, right? So you need to do your part. So setting those boundaries is great, because then the responsibility of their body healing is on them, not on you. Let me say that again. The responsibility of their body healing is on them. And that is such a great feeling. You're never again going to have that person comes in and goes, yeah, you just didn't get it, doc, because the headaches came back. I didn't get it? Like, I'm sorry. I adjusted you and then you went and drank a bunch of beer. Or I adjusted you and you went right back to that stressful job, or home to your spouse and yelled at them. Like, no, that's not on me. That's not a thing, right? So then just kind of setting that boundary and saying, look, this is how it works. Okay, so getting really clear on my job versus your job can be a really healthy boundary to set for people. And then the last piece is making sure you schedule those boundaries. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to take a lunch, schedule your lunch. Don't just let it fall when you start slowing down and then eat really quick, inhale your lunch and go right back to adjusting. If for no other reason, then reflux is a thing when you bend over, if you haven't digested your food. So set those boundaries, put those in your calendar. The end of your day, put it in your calendar. Know when you're ending, when you're done. Empower your staff to say no. Doctor, after 7 o'clock tonight, she does get back in the office at 10:30 tomorrow morning, and we happen to have an opening at 1 o'clock, right? So empower them to do that, but schedule that time, schedule the admin time. I mentioned that earlier. I recommend at least 4 hours time every single week. Okay. And everybody's like, holy moly, 4 hours of not getting paid and just working on my business. Like, that's ridiculous. That's so much time. I don't have time for that. And it's like, well, if you don't have time for that, you're never going to feel caught up or finished for the day. How fun is it? And maybe some of you don't even know what this feeling feels like, to be done at the end of the day. Like, literally, you lock the door and you leave and you're like, yeah, I'm caught up. I'm done. I'm there. It's a great feeling. And until you have that feeling, you need to schedule 4 hours of admin every single week. And then you need to prioritize things. So prioritizing looks like this. If it's patient facing, it gets done first. So if it's directly affecting a patient, it gets done first. End of story. Second priority is collecting income. So if it's something you have to do that will then get you income, for instance, filling out paperwork for an attorney or something like that, then that gets done second. And third is all of that other stuff that we like to play with and organize and do stuff to put off the more important 2 priorities we just talked about, right? So prioritize your time. You're going to shut off your phone. You're going to lock your door. You're going to put a sign on your door, a very friendly, kind sign on your door that says, please don't bother me. Or a really mean sign if the kind one doesn't work, right? Step it up and do that. But yeah, so put that there so that there's no disruption during that time. And those 4 hours get caught up. Now, you don't need 4 hours. I don't do 4 hours anymore because I'm caught up. I'm there. I'm at this point where it takes me 10 to 15 minutes to do my admin wrap up each week. Yeah, 10 to 15 minutes to stay on top of everything. But you've got to get those systems in place. And in order to do that, you need those 4 hours every single week of admin time. I do schedule 2 hours, but typically 15 minutes in, I'm done and caught up. So that's really cool. So that's what I would recommend for you. All month long, we've been talking about self-care. And so I'm going to give you a little ritual that you can utilize that will help you create those boundaries and set the stage to be conscious of your boundaries and setting healthy boundaries for yourself and others. So I use essential oils, and the blend that I use is tea tree, clove, rosemary, cinnamon, eucalyptus, and wild orange. There's the short version of that is going to be using tea tree and either On Guard or Thieves, depending on if you like doTERRA or Young Living. It doesn't matter, whatever oils you like. But those are the hard to give you the enhancement, the smell, and setting the tone for this. So I put the oils on the back of my neck, on my solar plexus, and at the base of my sacrum. And then I just say, and I literally, I don't know if you could see me, but I put one hand here. I'll bend this down. You get to see my chest for just a minute. So I put one hand here and one hand here, and I push them apart. And I just say to myself, I am setting healthy boundaries for myself and others. And then I say, and I'm not allowing anything into my space that does not serve me. And so hopefully that would help you. But you set healthy boundaries for yourself and others so that you can truly be of service of others. And then you don't allow anything into your space that does not serve you. And for your highest good and greatest joy are the words that my grandmother always gave me. And so those are the words I typically use is I won't allow anything into my space that's not for my highest good or greatest joy. Okay? Because again, self-care is about sacred selfishness. And selfish is not a bad thing, ladies. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. Being selfish means that you're coming first. And when you're filled up, you have so much more to give to everybody else. And so that's why it's so important to do sacred selfishness, set those boundaries, and really allow for space between you and others so that you can really interact effectively in all the things. Not necessarily 6 feet of space. That might be a little excessive, right? Anyway, little silly joke about all the things going on right now with all the craziness. So once you set that, I do that first thing in the morning, and then sometimes I'll do it at lunch too. If I have a heavy patient day where there's been a lot of emotional response, a lot of interaction, a death, a lot more comforting happening, I found out this week someone that I dearly love is going into an illness, and they're processing an illness, and it's like, okay, so I needed to set those boundaries a second time so that my emotional state doesn't affect the next patient, right? Because your emotional state should never come into play when you're dealing with patients, especially when you go from one patient bawling, crying, processing, to the next patient who's celebrating something great. You need to be able to totally change your energy to match and reflect their energy so that they can have the best life they can possibly have in that moment, best experience in that moment in your office. So set those boundaries. Sometimes I do it at lunch. Sometimes I do it a couple times a day. I always have those oils at the office just in case. If you're struggling with boundaries, so that those boundaries are always upheld. I love online scheduling. I just started with an online schedule system, and holy moly, it is so awesome because the patients can't book where there's not a spot. And the system doesn't, oh, okay, I'll invent a spot for you because you have a headache. Like, the system doesn't do that, right? It's just flat out, nope, no spot, sorry. And so that's been really great. So if you're struggling with boundaries, set a system up in place that will help keep those boundaries for you, and then be really consistent with that. If you want help brainstorming on what systems might work for you, reach out, let me know. I have a ton of videos on Patreon under bethebestchiropractor.com on Patreon. So I'll post that link below so you can check those out. That gives you, practice enhancement, patient education, all kinds of ways to set boundaries, and all kinds of great stuff. But yeah, thanks for listening. Set those boundaries and stand by them. Be consistent